Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be tackling a project my wife has been asking me for a couple weeks. So come along for the ride and I hope you enjoy. So for today's project we are going to be making some wall art. To start this process I started with a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of just standard plywood, 1/2 inch thickness from the local big box store. Got it home and directly onto the workbench, and from there I just started with a 120 grit sandpaper, just lightly sanding with a random orbit sander, as you can see. All I'm trying to accomplish here is to just knock down the high spots to better allow the stain that I'll be using to penetrate into the wood. The one thing that makes it difficult with plywood and sanding is the veneer on the very top or the very top layer of the plywood is extremely thin. So using something like a belt sander, using something that's a lot more aggressive of a grit, will tend to start to sand holes through the plywood itself. And once that happens, there's no coming back from it. There's no fixing it. You may be able to put some filler over it, but that's about it. After I hit it with 120 sandpaper, I moved to something a lot more fine. I moved to I believe this was a 320 or a 400, just to make it as smooth as possible. Since we're going to be applying a gel stain to this with a towel or a rag, I didn't want to have any high spots that would get snagged with the towel or the paper towel that I use. And yeah, that's it. Sand away. It's a lot of sanding. Again, continue to move the sander at all times. Don't stop in any one particular spot, and just continue to go back and forth until you get an even surface across the entire piece of wood. Alright, now that we're done sanding, the next step is going to be cutting this down into a little more manageable pieces. So first step for me is going to be just placing some 2x4s underneath the plywood itself to help elevate it a little bit, so when I cut this with the circular saw it doesn't end up going into the workbench. So just placing 2x4s underneath. You could use anything, any type of spacer, or you could just use any sawhorse, any type of setup that you want. Here I am taking just a straight edge clamp that I believe I bought from Harbor Freight, super cheap. Just placing it down the middle, measuring it out. I want to cut these into 2 pieces. Plywood itself is heavy and very awkward to maneuver around, especially when you're moving things around and trying to cut things with a table saw. It gets extremely difficult to do it on your own, so whatever you can do to cut it down into manageable pieces will make your life a million times easier. Also, let me add that this is something that can be accomplished at the big box stores as well. I know both Home Depot and Lowe's have saws that they're able to cut down plywood sheets into. So if you don't have a truck, if you don't have some of the tools that you see in this video, they are able to help you and assist you by cutting it into smaller pieces to make things more manageable for you, so you don't have to do this at home. Alright, so now let's get to cutting. We've set the clamp. I set the depth on my circular saw to just barely make it through, and we're just going to make a single pass across this, which is a standard circular saw, and cut this piece in half. Alright, now that we have everything sized up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start applying the stain. Like I said before, we're going to use a gel stain for this one. This is a Minwax gel stain. I believe the color is walnut. I'm a giant fan of gel stain. Not so much a giant fan of the Minwax brand. I'm more of a general finishes type of guy, but this will serve a purpose because I haven't used it in a long time and I need to use it up and I need to get rid of it, and it matches a color that the wife is looking for. Now, for gel stain, for those who haven't used it before, it is something that you normally apply with a rag. And the reason that I like it is from a standpoint of consistency. You can put on as much or as little as you like. So as you see, when you first apply it, it starts super dark. But then as you work the product into the wood itself, it will start to pick some of it up. And the more you rub, the lighter you can make it. It makes life easier when it comes to, from a standpoint of blending things together. I've had difficulties with plywoods from a standpoint of color consistency when using something other than gel stain. I'm just a giant fan of it. It's fantastic. I love it. And now comes my favorite part of every build I do, using the table saw. Any chance I get to use this, I will take it. So here I am cutting the 2 pieces of plywood into 8-inch wide strips. This will make life a million times easier when it comes down to the point of material handling. Again, if you do not have a table saw, this is not a big deal. This is something that the big box stores can cut down to size for you. It will make it a little more of a pain when it comes to staining. You'll have a lot more individual pieces that you have to sit and stain instead of one consistently big piece, which could be kind of an annoyance, but you know what? Table saws are expensive. Not everybody has the room for them. And to be quite honest with you, it's also the most dangerous tool that you could have in your shop. So do what's safe, use the tools that you have, and utilize those resources that you have available to you to get this done. Now that I have everything cut into 8-inch strips, I am just going to set up just a simple stop block system on my miter saw. The height that we're going to be using for these is going to be 9 inches, so the finished dimensions is going to be 8 inches wide by 9 inches tall. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm just taking off the top fence system and then just setting up just a quick clamp on top of it at 9 inches so that I can have a consistent cut. If you're going back and forth and individually measuring every single block, you're not going to have a consistent measurement. It's not going to turn out perfect, not the way that you're going to be looking for. Here I'm just cutting just a test strip just to ensure that it's to the right length and right dimensions that I'm looking for, and then from there just start cutting away. It's basically an assembly line system, which makes this very nice. You never have to measure anything again. Once that stop block is set up, you just continue to go and you just run all the pieces. And it makes life easier when it comes to doing something like this, something like an assembly line setup, because this piece of plywood will produce close to, I believe I had 50 pieces when everything was all said and done. So having to sit there and having to measure all of that out would be a lot of time added onto this project. And for most of us, these are things that we do on the weekends. We got to try to cut corners, or not cut corners where we can, but try to save whatever time we can so that we can move on and do other things. Alright, so this next part is 100% unnecessary, and it's something that I wanted to do, just kind of add just a little bit of decoration to it. So right now I'm taking just a trim router and hitting the edges with a 1/8 round over bit to help soften them up. I also like the two-tone kind of colored look as well, with the dark wood on top and the plywood color coming through. As I was using the trim router, I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. I don't have a stable enough hand to be able to use it, so I busted out the bigger router. This is my Bosch router, mounted to a piece of plexiglass underneath, and again, just using the round over bit and just kind of using it as a router table. I don't currently have one. It is in the works that I will build one onto my table saw, but as of right now, I don't have one available. Again, just like anything else, use the tools that you have available to you. This isn't something that's 100% necessary, just something that I decided to do to add a little bit of decoration to it and help kind of soften up the edges. Alright, now comes the part that I hate the most, painting. For this, all I'm using is just a standard just white latex paint you can pick up at any hardware store, and a stencil that we purchased from just the local hobby shop. With this, just place the stencil down, hold it down as much as you can on the sides with your fingers to try to help any type of like splotching or any paint that will run underneath this stencil itself. Either way, you're gonna end up getting it. I haven't found a way to really alleviate that problem. So your first step should be pretty light. Your second coat, as you can see here, you go through with a little bit of a smaller brush with a little bit more detail and go ahead and straighten up the edges and make things look a little bit crisper, make them look a little bit nicer, and also start laying on the paint a little bit thicker. So you don't have a ton of see-through coming through the white. With your first coat that you put on, it is going to be transparent, so it is going to show up a little bit darker because the stain underneath the white's going to show through a little bit. For the second and last piece of this, I am using just a little bit of a smaller stencil. Again, same rules apply. Just all you're trying to do right now is just try to get paint on the board. Just a super light coat, holding it down and pressing it as firm as possible, and trying to make sure to eliminate or try to reduce the amount of bleed through that you're having that'll happen underneath the stencil itself. Overall, this thing turned out great. I hope you guys enjoy this. Please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.